all across America and around the world. This is Veterans Radio. This is Veterans Radio.
And welcome to Veterans Radio. I am Jim Fausone with veteransradio.net. We are recording today from the Legal Help for Veterans studio in Northville, Michigan. Legal Help for Veterans is a veterans disability law firm. You can reach us at 800-693-4800. We want to welcome to Veterans Radio today Ryan Pitts, a Army veteran. After 6 years, was a staff sergeant when he got out. He's now working in the defense contractor industry and is talking to us from southern New Hampshire. Ryan, welcome to Veterans Radio.
Jim, thanks for having me on.
Well, it's a real pleasure to have you on. You have quite a distinguished military career, which we will get to. But we always like to start with when you got into the Army and why you got into the Army. Give us the basics there.
Yeah, I joined in 2003 when I was 17, enlisted in my senior year. Came into that year not knowing what I wanted to do with myself. Knew I wanted to go to college, but wasn't ready at that point. And thought the military, the Army would be, it wouldn't be a waste of my time. I'd get some valuable life experience, get some money for college, and get to serve my country.
And did you have a family history that drove you in that direction, Ryan, or was this just sort of after some soul searching and looking around the next step for you?
Yeah, so no family history. Some of my friends in high school were looking, and a couple of them had signed up, and I thought, that's a pretty good idea. They told me about it, went and saw the recruiter, and, well, they obviously did a good job selling it because I ended up doing 6 years. So.
Well, it probably was a good 6 years mostly for you, and you attended basic training and moved on to some individual training in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, which is a long way from your native New Hampshire. Tell us about your training in the military.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, you're right. I'd never been on a plane before going to basic training, so ended up in basic training in Oklahoma, did my individual training there, went on to airborne school in Georgia at Fort Benning, and found my way over to the 173rd Airborne Brigade in Italy. And, well, as anybody that served, that's when the real training started. Spent a little over a year training up with those guys before shipping off to Afghanistan.
And you actually deployed off to Afghanistan twice. In what capacity were you over there, Ryan? What was your MOS?
Yeah, I was a forward observer, and I served in an infantry battalion. I was assigned to an infantry company, so everything they did, everywhere they went, I was right there with them.
And tell us a little bit about your first deployment.
Yeah, so our first deployment, we were down south, close to Kandahar in the Zabul province, the town of Kalat. At that point, the focus was on Iraq, so me being, a young, naive 19-year-old, I'm thinking we weren't going to see much action, but just in the first few months, we were in several major firefights, and, this is when I guess the insurgency there started kind of ticking back up, so it wasn't the handing out blankets and beans like I thought it was going to be. Granted, we did a lot of humanitarian aid-type missions, but there was a fair amount of fighting on that deployment.
And then you rotated back to the States. Tell us a little bit about that time before you end up back in Afghanistan.
So after that deployment from 05 to 06, I rotated back to Italy with the unit, stayed there for about a year. We had our R&R time, go home after that, blow off some steam, and then head back and get ready and get training again. I mean, at that point, it was, everybody in the military, I think, regardless of kind of branch, you were either deployed or you were getting ready to go again, and that's exactly what we did. And we were actually told we were going to Iraq. We spent most of that year training for that, and when we were actually in Germany doing our last field exercises, our war games, to get ready to go, we got the change of orders to go to Afghanistan.
And this second tour into Afghanistan for you lasted about 15 months, I believe. And again, tell us a little bit about what the mission was and what your experiences were.
Yeah, I mean, the mission again there was to find and fix the enemy and, help transition for the Afghans to be able to govern and protect themselves. We did a lot of missions with the Afghan National Army. It was a different area of Afghanistan for me that time. We were up north in Kunar province, so northeast of Bagram Airfield, and it was just incredibly rugged terrain. It's the foothills, kind of. Didn't look like the foothills, but it was the foothills of the Hindu Kush there, and the fighting was fierce. Our sister company, Battle Company, was in the Korangal Valley that became known from Sebastian Junger's War in the documentary Restrepo, and it was. I thought we had seen combat on my first deployment, but the second one was just kind of a different fight altogether.
And I wanted to talk a little bit about that, Ryan, because the first time through, you're, as you mentioned, young, naive 19-year-old kid. You've been through it a little bit more the second time through. How in your own mind did you sort of look at that difference in whether it was experience or now you were one of the more seasoned guys, or talk to us a little bit about how that maybe changed your approach?
Yeah, I mean, by that point when I deployed, I was a leader, so I had some soldiers that I was responsible for. Having been there, had a little bit to know what to expect in terms of both the monotony of the day-to-day that happens when you're deployed, but also kind of the dynamic events that pop up. Another unit gets in contact and you have to be ready to go. Knowing a little bit about, what goes through your mind and how to react, when you do get in contact at first with the enemy. And so I think, the first deployment, being an individual contributor and almost, I'm a junior soldier of, okay, focus on your job, do what you're told, look out for the people around you to, when the second deployment, you're in that leadership position that, your job is not just to look out for yourself, you're looking out for the guys around you, but also your subordinates. So that changed things some, and, you're just learning more. I mean, you still, again, are learning new things. It's a different area. It's a different fight, learning the terrain, learning the local population. There were a lot of things that changed that I saw from my first deployment. We had done missions with the Afghan National Army on our first deployment, but a lot of what they would do is come in after a battle and do a lot of battle damage assessment, to where on our second deployment, there were times where they were the main effort and we were in support and trying to, make sure that they were capable and had the competency and the confidence to be able to execute missions on their own.
And you mentioned that you didn't really come from a military family, but you had some buddies from high school who joined up about the same time. As you moved from deployment to deployment, what sort of feedback were you getting from back home? How was the family handling this, and how did they look at you in terms of the role you were undertaking?
Yeah, I think, from the get-go, my family was obviously proud that I had chosen to serve, but I think like any parent, they didn't want me to go to combat. My family and friends were, unbelievably supportive, sending me care packages, talking to, writing letters, emails. We talk, periodically. But at the same time, I mean, it's one of those experiences that you can't understand unless you've gone through it. I really noticed it, I think, after my second deployment, after I was wounded in particular, and coming home and could kind of, felt an uneasiness that I felt, that I perceived from my friends and family of, not really knowing, I guess in a way of looking at me as like, is this guy broken? Does he have PTS? Because, that was, all over the news. And I think this uncertainty, I almost felt like they looked at me as, is he going to be volatile? And it was very noticeable to me. And it was kind of strange to be around these people that I had been around for so long and known, to kind of feel this discomfort.
And I think a lot of veterans have that, you mentioned it as discomfort in the transition phase, and a lot of that's because so much of the country our friends or family can't relate to what folks are going to because so few people are actually in the active military these days. So it's interesting that you've comment on that. But let me get on to what you allude to, which is some sort of the battle, if you will, that you were involved in Afghanistan on July 13th, 2008, and for which you were ultimately awarded and a recipient of the Medal of Honor. Ryan, can you walk us through what happened that day?
Yeah, I mean, we're in the 14th month of our 15-month deployment. We're a few weeks from going home. The unit that was going to be coming in to replace us was going to have lower manpower than us, and they had less experience. And we had shut down some bases to the north of where our battalion headquarters had been. We had occupied them previously. The enemy they were remote. They had to be resupplied by helicopter. They couldn't be resupplied by the ground. And it just was decided, we should really shut these down and move back to the population areas to really, stay more effectively execute our core mission. And so we had moved into the village of Wanat. We'd been talking about moving up there for about a year, and our role was to establish security for the construction of a new base to hand over to the new unit. We wanted to position them for success just as the units before us had, and our mission's not over until we're done. So we moved out on the evening of July 8th under cover of darkness, got up there, started establishing our fighting positions, and started digging in to secure the area. And on the morning of July 13th, approximately 150 to 200 plus enemy fighters moved into the surrounding hills and into the village. And that morning, shortly after Stand 2, they initiated a large-scale complex assault, and it was terrible. We ended up losing 9 guys: Sergio Abad, Jonathan Ayers, Jason Bogar, Jonathan Brostrom, Israel Garcia, Jason Hovater, Matthew Phillips, Pruitt Rainey, and Gunners Willing. And those guys are the reason, the rest of us came home. But I may have been, awarded for that day, but valor was really everywhere. It was a team effort. I mean, no one person gave more than anybody else. There were guys like Jacob Sones and Dylan Meyer that were jumping up on the hoods of trucks completely exposed to enemy fire to reload our heavy weapon systems. Guys like Jason Hovater and Jonathan Brostrom, made a mad dash over 100 yards open ground, right by enemy fighting positions to reinforce the observation post where I was at. It was just, there were incredible acts everywhere.
And this started off really with sort of overwhelming numbers. I think there were about 49 Americans at that Wanat patrol base at the start, and as you say, maybe as many as 200 anti-Afghan forces that stormed the location. I think those are the numbers I've seen.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, they moved in. They had the high ground. They had the element of surprise. They had us completely surrounded. From the onset, I mean, they obviously had a plan. They targeted our heavy weapon systems. We had a tow missile truck. They targeted that from the outset with RPGs until they were able to destroy that. It was a large fight.
And I think at times the public doesn't hear about what you've just described as a well-organized plan, that the enemy knew exactly what they were doing and how they were approaching this fight, and were utilizing the element of surprise. And that first wave of rocket-propelled grenades really caught the observation post you were at, I would say, by surprise, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the opening volley, it started, they initiated with the machine gun burst, and that was the signal to commence. And, the observation post was immediately rocked with rocket-propelled and hand grenades. There was 4 of us, 3 or 4 of us right off the bat that were wounded within the first few opening minutes. Matthew Phillips and Gunnar Zwilling had been killed. And, right there's 4 or 5 guys that are immediately, seemingly out of the fight, and the rest of the junior guys stepped up, like Pruitt Rainey and Jonathan Ayers and Jason Bogar, and immediately took control. And just, it was kind of amazing to me that there's this, in the near term, this vacuum of leadership, and these guys just stepped up and did their jobs in this completely, not normal situation, unnatural situation. And, that's just always been something that has impressed me.
Well, you were knocked down in that initial wave. You were heavily wounded and bleeding from shrapnel in arms and legs, and really at that point, if I understand it right, a bit alone, waiting for some assistance to get to your position.
That was a little bit further on in the fight. I was knocked down in the initial volley. I'd never been in a fight where anybody had to fight wounded, but this one was unlike any other. Nobody was going to be able to sit out if you could contribute. All the wounded guys, anybody that could was. It was probably, I think, about 30 or 45 minutes into the fight where everybody at the observation post, I was the only one left alive. Everybody else was either casualties or had to fall back. And it was Israel Garcia, Mike Denton, Sean Samaru, and Jacob Sones that made a push to the OP, and those guys saved my life. And it cost Israel Garcia his. He traded his life for mine.
You find yourself in a situation where, due to the injuries, you had some limited ability to fight. Certainly, you were able to utilize some grenades to hold your position. Can you tell us a little bit about how you were able to contribute through this hellish fight as others came forward to help in your rescue?
And that, like I said, in that initial volley, I was wounded, and I was pretty severely wounded. I took shrapnel to both my legs, my left arm, a little bit of my hip, and I couldn't move my legs, and I felt like it took me a minute to just gain my bearings because I was kind of shell-shocked by the concussions that had come in. And I crawled to our southern fighting position, and Jason Bogar put a tourniquet on my right leg to prevent any catastrophic loss of blood. And I was sitting there thinking I was done, and I'm looking around at all these guys fighting and hearing the amount of fire coming in. And Stafford had crawled in and told me that they were throwing hand grenades and that Phillips had been killed and Zwilling had been killed. And with everything, what everybody was doing around me, I just felt compelled to do my part. And so I crawled back to that northern fighting position. And, if the enemy's within hand grenade, to throw hand grenades to us, they're within hand grenade range for us as well. So I started throwing hand grenades at them and just kind of falling back on all the amazing training that we had received. It was kind of, for lack of a better term, like a capstone experience of just, you just start drawing on, and these are all the resources I have. Okay, I got a machine gun. I've been trained on that. It wasn't my primary weapon system, but, everybody was cross-trained. Everybody knew how to do the jobs of the people around them. And so, I got on that, trying to contribute there. And when John Brostrom and Hovader initially showed up, John Brostrom was our lieutenant, so he was able to take control. I handed off the machine gun to him, and, it was transitioned, okay, try and make a difference on the radio, calling in fire missions. And it was really just, everything I was doing was just trying to keep up with the guys around me.
And you were trained as a radio operator and took over the radio to call in to the command post to call in fire positions. But the enemy was so close. Tell us a little bit about how that was able to be structured in that instance.
Well, we were right in the middle of the village, and so they had moved into buildings close to where our main vehicle patrol base was set up down in the middle of the village. They had moved into the mosque, and there was a hotel structure there. They had moved into buildings, within as close as 20 to 50 meters of our positions. Up at the OP, there was some dead space to the north. They had moved down through a riverbed, and they were so close, at the point in time where I was by myself when I was relaying my situation to our company commander. I mean, everybody with a radio could hear the enemy talking over my radio, could hear them as I was relaying the situation.
How long did this firefight last, Ryan?
I was on the ground for about 90 minutes, and before really our first platoon was able to convoy up from our main battalion headquarters to the south, and medevacs and Apache started coming in. But it went on, all day, and really the days after as, they continued to pursue them as the enemy was exfilling. There were other units that came in. Some of our sister companies came in to help secure the area. There were other units that engaged, enemy encampments that were further, I believe, east down the valley. So the majority of the fighting took place probably through the first half of that day on July 13th, but, the actions continued on for a couple of days.
So in the Medal of Honor citation, and we're talking to Ryan Pitts, who was awarded the Medal of Honor by President Obama in July of 2014, it recognizes that with incredible toughness and resolve, he subsequently took control of the observation post and returned fire on the enemy. As the enemy drew nearer, Sergeant Pitts threw grenades, holding them after the pin was pulled and the safety lever was released to allow a nearly immediate detonation on the hostile forces. Unable to stand on his own and near death because of the severity of his wounds and blood loss, Sergeant Pitts continued to lay suppressive fire until a two-man reinforcement team arrived. There's no book for this, Ryan. There's no manual for this. As you're going, tell us sort of what brings you through this in that situation.
I think we harp on training, and it's almost to the point where it becomes cliche, but it's not, right? Everything, every day, every minute you spend training counts, right? Like, for instance, the cooking off of the grenades, pulling the pin and throwing them. I did that once in basic training with a dummy grenade when we're going through our grenade qualification. Pull the pin, let the fuse burn down, cook it off, and then clear a bunker. There were other things, using the machine gun. That was just cross-training that we did with other units, with other guys in our unit, in our platoon. That, in those times, no, you can't train for that, but you can train for the things that you're going to do there. Just as Bogart put the tourniquet on my leg. I mean, he wasn't a medic, but we were all trained on, sticking IVs, applying tourniquets, doing needle chest decompression, treating sucking chest wounds. That, no, you can't, train realistically for that type of situation, but you learn the little pieces, the fundamentals, operating a machine gun, throwing grenades, treating casualties, that enable you to put it all together in those situations. And, the other part is, our leadership made this training, all of our training, as stressful as it could. I mean, we went through, sleep deprivation, pushing ourselves physically to, what we thought our limits. Part of that is our leadership showing us, look, whatever you think you're capable of more. We're going to push you, and we're going to show you that you can do it. And I think that's what all of it comes back to. And it's the other part that I guess comes from training and the bonds you make is just, when you're with those people and you develop those bonds, you kind of pick each other up. You're looking around and everybody's trying to push each other, and they're doing everything they can, risking their lives for their brothers. That, when they're doing that, you have to reciprocate. I mean, that's your obligation. I think, our greatest duty is we're our brother's keepers. And our job, it doesn't matter whether you're a machine gunner, a medic, or a forward observer, your job is to do everything within your ability to help bring your brothers home. And that's what everybody did that day.
Well, I know the Army and your company and your regiment and brigade are all very proud of what you accomplished. As certainly the Medal of Honor that was bestowed upon you is recognition to all the efforts of all the guys that day. And we're really glad that you can share with us some of your thoughts, Ryan Pitts. But let me turn now, if we can, to sort of the situation where you have to, it's time to go through the healing process and the recovery process and ultimately the integration back into civilian life process as you discharged from the Army in 2009 after about 6 years. Give us a little sense of that recovery period.
So I immediately I was evacuated about 90 minutes after the fight and made my way back to Walter Reed. I spent 30 days inpatient and then about a year at Walter Reed in D.C. doing various physical therapy and going through my med board process to go out. And I think there were benefits to being there at Walter Reed. I mean, it was more relaxed than being in the infantry unit that I was accustomed to, so there was a little bit of a kind of like a pre-transition there to mellowing out to civilian life. And after that, after I left Walter Reed and was ultimately discharged, I went back to college, returned home and went to college. And, that everything is kind of its own transition. It's a different phase of the operation. And, that wasn't without its challenges. I mean, I came from a different culture where, if you're not 10 minutes early, you're late. Whoever's talking at the front of a room, doesn't matter whether it's a private or a captain, if they're giving a presentation, you're supposed to pay attention. And, going to college had its challenges when, I'm sitting there and kids are rolling in 10, 15, 30 minutes later, skipping class, and, they're talking while the professor's talking or not, cruising Facebook. And it was hard to kind of let go of that military structure and that mindset of, getting frustrated with that and just accepting it. And, even after leaving college, I felt that I navigated that transition, and then it was going into the civilian workforce. And that had its own, challenges. I mean, everything in the military is about training. Everybody's training the people below them to move on up. And a lot of the civilian workforce, it's OJT, right? You got to be motivated to learn as much as you can on your own. Everybody's kind of, tapped, doing everything they can to catch up. And it also, you're in the military and you're part of that platoon that you have this, it's a family. You become a family. Everybody looks out for each other. My buddies, they let me know when I was messing up. And I think that was, one of the great things. They were there to, pick you up when you were down, but also tell you, hey, you're making some mistakes here and this is how you can get better, to go to what felt like the civilian world and be ripped out of that family and just feel, isolated like you're on your own, that, they have their challenges. People will ask, how was your transition? And I'll say I'm still transitioning. I think, everybody is through different, phases of their life. I don't think there'll probably be a point where I'm fully transitioned and fully processed everything that I've been through. It's kind of a journey and just doing what I need to along the way to successfully reintegrate.
Well, I think that's a good piece of advice for our veteran radio listeners. We're talking to former Army Staff Sergeant Ryan Pitts, who has also been awarded the Medal of Honor for his acts in Afghanistan. And one of the roles you've taken on, Ryan, because of your status, is as an ambassador for the Cohen Veterans Network. It is a set up by Stephen A. Cohen. He's set up a number of private Cohen military family clinics around the country. There are 10 of them now. Tell us a little bit about the Cohen Veterans Network.
Yeah, I mean, it's made possible through the very generous philanthropy of Stephen Cohen, but they're locating these clinics in communities that they've identified a significant need, where there's gaps with services that exist that maybe can't fulfill that need. They're locating themselves close to the population to make it as accessible as possible. It's low to no cost to people. They're treating the entire family. Discharge status doesn't matter. They're really finding, incredible partners. I do this along with a friend of mine, Kyle White, who's a fellow Medal of Honor recipient. We served in the same company. We've gotten the opportunity to go to these clinic openings, meet these staffs. The Cohen organization, the CVN organization, has done an incredible job of, when they identify a community in need, they identify community partners that have experience there and the abilities, needed to treat to provide treatment that our veterans and families deserve. And so, watching it over the past couple of years as they've grown from 1 clinic to 10 really has been pretty incredible. And Kyle and I had an opportunity this year to go out for their, annual CVN meeting where they brought, a bunch of the staff from all the clinics together to get to know each other, share best practices. And that was incredible just to see, these people have not lost their passion. I mean, they're incredibly passionate from day one. A lot of these clinics are staffed by, veterans or family members of veterans, but also, civilians that are, very passionate about treating, our veterans and families for the invisible wounds of war.
Well, and I think back in 2000, maybe it was mid or late 2016, when I first spoke to representatives from Cohen Veterans Network, the fact that they were trying to get out there and provide outpatient mental health care not only to veterans but to military families. The VA doesn't treat family members. So this idea that they were going to get out there and fill this need and fill it through philanthropic efforts was really quite impressive to me. But at the time it was 1 clinic. Now they've got 10, and they range all over the country from Dallas, San Antonio, El Paso, Fayetteville, North Carolina, D.C., Philadelphia, New York, Denver, Clarkston, Tennessee. It's really a robust network at this point. Ryan, tell us what your sense of that robustness is going to be as it goes forward.
Well, I mean, they've got 10. The goal is to get to 25. They've, got 5 more planned. They've identified, where those are going to be. I mean, they had ambitious goals starting, and, I think they're meeting those. They've served since 2016 over 6,000 clients. One of their goals was to treat families. They've got a split of about 40-60 between families and veterans. Even among the veterans, about 25% of the veteran population that they've served as clients has been female veterans, which is about twice the ratio of female veterans represented in the United States. And I being in the clinics, I mean, they've got incredible rooms set up to make it accommodating for families with kids, to make these kids feel like they're in a safe place. They do a lot of training to make sure that their staff are prepared for that. They've done a lot to break down barriers to accessibility. I mean, beyond just providing low to no cost treatment, where, they're aggressively exploring and leveraging telehealth where they can. Because sometimes even if you live in a city, it could take an hour or so to get across, and taking time out of work or getting there can be a challenge. And they've they're rolling out telehealth to the best of their ability to make sure that veterans and families are getting the treatment that they deserve.
And while I certainly think this is a great program and a great example of philanthropy here in the United States, this is not without critics. This is not a program or a set of clinics that at least some folks are critical of, because it's taking patients, I suppose, away from the VA, or maybe it's paving a way towards the boogeyman of privatization of VA. Have you run into those kinds of concerns by people about, it's kind of good, but, and they want to talk mostly about the critical aspects?
I haven't personally, but as you said, it's out there. And I think it's also just a lack of information or awareness about how CVN approaches it. I mean, they're partnering with the VA. They do training back and forth. The VA in a lot of these cities, they're invited to training at the Cohen clinics, and the Cohen clinics, their staff go and participate in that training. The VA has made available their composite mental health treatment data that helps CVN determine these communities where there's a lack of resources. Some of these people, Cohen treats people that have, it doesn't matter what your discharge status is. So there are some people that wouldn't be eligible for treatment in the VA that are able to get it with the Cohen clinics. So while I understand that there are those concerns, they're not concerns of mine.
And I guess I'd sort of ask you to maybe give, what would you say to a veteran out there or a veteran's family member who's maybe knows they've got to deal with something but has been reluctant to do it? Maybe there's a word of encouragement that you can pass along from your experiences and from your experiences with the Cohen Veterans Network that would make a difference. What are your thoughts there?
When I think of it, I think of whether it's PTS or whatever other sort of transition challenges people are going through. We've had I think they're natural reactions to some very unnatural situations, some very unnatural experiences. And I think for a long time there's been, the stigma around mental health. That's not, the invisible wounds aren't viewed the same way as the physical ones. Physical wounds, tend to be revered, right? That you've spilled blood for your country, and I think it's been a mistake to look at the invisible wounds as being any different. If I have a broken leg, I'm going to go see a doctor. I'm not going to try and walk around on that leg. The invisible wounds aren't any different. I think it's about do what you have to get healthy again, right? These families and veterans have sacrificed a lot, and they deserve to lead, healthy, happy lives. And Cohen is helping them get back to that.
And Ryan, do you, off the top of your head, remember the website if people want more information on the network?
Yeah, CohensVeteranNetwork.org, and of course there's always Google, so you can always Google it, and they have resources there. And, I encourage people to reach out, right? I mean, I'll say myself, there's times where I've had my struggles and I've reached out for help. There are Cohen's networks up here, but I certainly would have reached out, had that been an option. That just do what you have to get back to the life that you've earned. And I mean, they're doing an incredible job of seeing people. If you call today, you book an appointment today, and almost all their clients are getting an appointment within a week of making that first call. So it's there. It's an incredible resource, and people should take advantage of it.
Well, we want to thank you for taking some time talking to Veterans Radio today, Ryan Pitts, and updating us on the status of the Cohen Veterans Network and telling us about your military career and inspiring us all. Thank you for your time today.
Jim, thanks for having me.
And I want to thank everybody for listening to Veterans Radio today. I am Jim Fausone. It's been a pleasure to be your host. I'm a veterans disability lawyer at Legal Help for Veterans, and you can reach us at 800-693-4800 or legalhelpforveterans.com on the web. You can follow Veterans Radio on Facebook and listen to its podcasts and internet radio shows by going to veteransradio.net. And until next time, you are dismissed.
If you have a VA claim denied by the Board of Veterans' Appeals, contact Legal Help for Veterans at 1-800-693-4800. They're experts in handling cases before the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. Their number again, 1-800-693-4800.
Think of all the sleep hacks you've ever heard. You could spend years trying them all, or you could instantly transform your sleep with Boll & Branch. They make the softest, most breathable bedding you'll ever feel, and it's all 20% off. That's their best sale of the entire season. Millions of sleepers love their buttery soft sheets, airy blankets, cloud-like duvets, and so much more. And you can try all of them for 20% off with promo code INCREDIBLE. So hurry to bollandbranch.com today. That's BOLL and branch.com. See site for details.